This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Drinking with Authors. I am your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is the phenomenal, wearing a PlayStation shirt, C.R. Rice. And our guest today is Charles Blackstone. Woo! 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 Okay. You know, I haven't gone back to listen to see about this cheering thing because I forget by the time I get done with the episode whether they're doing the cheering thing. Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking real quick. I have an old school. I say that because we have a new cup, Drinking with Authors cup. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, no, you get swag for being on our show. You're going to get swag. That's how it works because we're the cool hosts and we have swag. You get swag as well. But I put orange juice. I drove for 10 hours today from Philadelphia back to North Carolina. Yeah, I don't know why I plan these things like this. Not proud of myself, but this has orange juice in it and lightning. And we all know how I feel about it. So Skunk Brother Spirits makes a moonshine called Lightning. And they recommended I mix it with lemonade, and I started mixing it with orange juice, and I'm quite happy about it. So Skunk Brother Spirits, DWA10 coupon code, living the dream. I also got water because I may die from what I've done here, so that's entirely possible. CR, what are you drinking today? Which one of the horsemen have you brought to bear?
Well, so I'm still doing Pestilence, which is the green tea and vodka. I think it's my favorite one. I still cannot figure out death. The couple of mixes I've done literally taste like death. So that one's on the back burner for right now.
Okay, Pestilence, got it. Green tea. It's healthy. It's healthy. It's kind of like my little combo here. Look at us, healthy people. Just kidding. Charles, what are you drinking?
Now, see, I wish I had brought a fancier cup.
Your cup is way fancier than ours.
So yours is rugged. I brought rosé because it's almost the summer and rosé goes with everything. And this one happens to be from here in New York, from the North Fork of Long Island, from a winery called Wolfer Estate, which is
bottle
beautiful.
Was amazing. That bottle was
and
so
the bottle
gorgeous.
Is beautiful, and it's called Summer in a Bottle, which, you know, what more could you ask for?
That's true. I often say that to myself. What more? I need summer in a bottle. Okay, Charles, for those out there that may not know, what do you write?
That I should have had a glass of wine before taking that question.
Well, we often say that to ourselves.
What do the books I've written are novels.
Well, that's helpful.
Contemporary novels.
Genre, like, let's go with genre of the novels.
Yeah, you know, set in contemporary times usually. You know, characters have cell phones, and I guess for the most part do.
Are they horror? Are they sci-fi? Or like, where are you going with that?
It's that category, you know, that you know, people call literary, where it's just you know, it can pull from any of those genre elements. I don't pull from a lot of them, but maybe I do.
When did you start writing? When did you start writing?
Like professionally?
No, like when? Well, yes, that's a question. But when did you start going, you know what? I want to be a writer.
I don't know when that happened, but I do know that I had a poem appear in the 6th grade yearbook about a tree, and it was a surprise to me. I didn't know that it had left, you know, the realm of the assignment and somehow made it to the yearbook people. It was very exciting. It was next to a drawing of a tree by a girl a grade ahead, who would later become a character on The Real World, Hawaii, if you remember that season.
That is so weird, like.
So And I think she also has had a brief career as a street artist. I think
Oh,
that's
wow.
the term you use. So, but it was, it was a tree, and that was pretty much the end of my career as a naturalist.
I see. Okay.
But it seemed to have prompted me into thinking about words on sentences
So-
on the page.
When did you grow up wanting to be a writer, or was it just something that later happened in life? Like, when did you arrive at a published novel?
Well, but I mean, back to these very early memories. I remember being interested in movies and plays, and and TV, of course. Dramatic TV. I don't know why a 10-year-old was watching some of those 80s movies that I liked so
those
much.
80s movies are to live by.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a reason for that. But it was the era of the we didn't really have cable or TV reception, but at one brief glorious point there was Showtime that had its own box, and I was able to record on VHS many of these movies, and we'll watch them over and over and over again.
Terms listeners might not understand. Just kidding. I'm totally
there
kidding.
used to be. It was what we considered, I guess, streaming. But streaming meant you looked at the TV guide and you're like, hey, I can see this, or you just randomly stumbled on something. Sometimes you'd set something to record, into the night, and then find another movie attached to it. It was great, and I would watch these things over and over and over again. And I was always interested in how they were constructed. Staging was very interesting to me. Some of these movies were adaptations of stage plays, and that I think took some residence in my head. But I wasn't the kind of reader that I would have liked to have been. You saw earlier, what you see behind me are some books, and then I don't know if you caught the
epic bookshelves.
Oh,
that's Brooklyn. I appreciate, and the Screaming Child. Brooklyn and Screaming Child. As we take a tour.
Yeah, explore with me. So I didn't really sort of like the character of this novel, Vintage Attraction. I considered myself kind of raising myself. So nobody really stepped in and said, this is something you should do. This is something you shouldn't do. Why is it a struggle? And it wasn't the comprehension or, reading. I mean, I read lots of stuff. I read the wrong stuff, according to my first grade teacher. I read the phone book. I read ads. At one point, I was reading the newspaper. I think I was 9, and I had a grandfather living with us briefly, and would read, and he had a vision impairment, so I would read the paper to him. So I was reading from a very young age, but not in the sense of books and stories. And I this pretty much was my story until until like high school, when I discovered that basically this literary fiction, I introduced myself to some of those the Brat Pack authors, and was kind of had the feeling that I think I would have wanted to have with the the stuff that came to me as a child, where I was brought into a world. I was very excited about it. I kind of put on that virtual reality suit that I think is key to both being a really good reader and being a writer. And then something clicked, and then around that time too, I started trying to write like these books, and then it kind of stuck with me.
Well, that's very cool. When did your first novel come out?
The first novel, 2004.
Oh, wow.
26-ish. You know, a lot of those 80s authors that I idolized, you know, and some nonfiction writers like Elizabeth Wurtzel, you know, all had these books come out before they were 30. So I remember thinking that was something important. You know, it's funny how time changes now. It's like I would just like sentences at any time, at any age. Like there's no, you know,
So
no limit.
what was your first book then that came out?
So the first book, ooh, I should not spill the rosé in the process of this. It was called The Week You Aren't Here, set in the characters, the months leading up to his college graduation, like in the early 2000s. And I began working on this when I was in my last months of college in the early 2000s. And, you know, so autobiographical elements, which I had been, you know, I had been playing with, you know, to some extent in the, you know, the apprentice work, I guess you could say, that I was doing. I'm going to turn on a light just in case.
Okay.
Is that too bright?
I don't. No, not at all.
So yeah, yeah. So that happened, and it involved the character wanting to go to grad school, and I was also wanted to go to grad school. So, you know, I had a draft completed before I went, and then I went and worked on it while I was there in Colorado and Boulder in a writing program for 2 years, and at the end, you know, I was able to get. It actually first came out in the UK.
Oh wow!
It didn't look like this. I should have brought over the other one from the shelves, but it came out in the UK, and you know, it's just so funny about you know, like the state of sort of like you know, indie publishers, and you know what they could do back then versus now. Back then, you know, print on demand was you know, was kind of a viable business model for a lot of them, because they didn't want to print, you know, 5,000 copies of a book and have to, you know, warehouse it. This particular now defunct British publisher had sort of an idea of, you know, a different model, you know, something resembling, you know, involving the internet to whatever it existed at that time. And so, you know, they did what it did. You know, they were new, I was new. I liked the cover art. They had somebody, you know, I guess read the manuscript and draw something, and it's kind of fun.
So how did you find that indie publisher?
This one, I think I was just, you know, I think what I knew at the time was, because it was sort of like an experimental work. You know, it was kind of you know, self-reflexive, and you know, when the autobiographical elements and writing about writing, like all these things are not typically things that appeal to mainstream publishers. They say because people don't want to read them. But I was listening to another author who just had a book come out that I have also to show, talking about how she liked to read them, and her character is interested in writing. And, you know, some other novels that I've read along the way are set in the world of publishing, and, you know, even TV has sort of engaged this territory. Show like Younger, even though that world does not resemble the world of publishing as we know it. At least they were pretending, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, which is, you know, it all, I think, goes to show that it's not territory that nobody cares about. But, you know, it was you know, very much a 20-something character written by a 20-something, and so I knew that it would have to, you know, it would have to be a house that was doing, you know, work like that. And so, you know, started sending it around.
What was the
you know,
feedback like from that first one? So it went out in the UK. What did the UK initially think of it?
they liked it. I liked it. I mean, I'd have to say the reviews were like largely positive. You know, that we were getting, and you know, it was a lot of American publications reviewing it. But yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know, a kinder time, or maybe it just kind of, you know, it made sense in not making a lot of sense. I remember one of the reviews, the reviewer was like, you know, I read 50 pages and I didn't know what was going on, and I gave up on it. And that, but you know, I mean, even that was not a negative review as some that I've seen since then. You know, I wouldn't consider it. You know, I think that was part of what the character of the book was. You know, it was supposed to be kind of this. You know, I sometimes called it like a transcript of this guy's thoughts in his head, and very minimal punctuation, and you know, kind of a lot of jumping, you know, from subject to subject. And
so you ended up getting it published in the UK, and then Simon and Schuster published it in the US, right?
then another Brooklyn-based indie actually on that one.
Okay.
So yeah, so they did that, and oh well, I had reached out to some writers in this you know, this experimental postmodern you know, genre, some, you know, books that I had read in grad school, and you know, I think very much informed my thinking, even though I had written most of this. I guess I'd read some of them prior to writing it, but as I read more, you know, I kind of, and was revising, I kind of understood more of what was going on, or you know, what I was after, you know, through that process. And I reached out to a writer named Jonathan Baumbach, who had founded Fiction Collective in the 60s, and you know, wrote, you know, kind of on the margins in this space of you know, the work was kind of self-reflexive and dense and you know, literary. And so you know, had trouble publishing that stuff traditionally. One of his kids is the filmmaker Noah Baumbach.
Oh, very
so anyway,
cool.
yeah. So I you know, emailed him. I was like, you know, it's funny to remember this stuff because it's so early era. But you know, sent him an email. I was like, I don't, you know, could you blurb this? The book came out in the UK, and no, actually it was for the UK one. So I was like, you know, I have this book coming out. Would you blurb it? Sent him, you know, like hard copy. Here's the the summer of the dirt bike that has taken hold in New York City. You know, he's like, send me the manuscript, and you know, I remember going to print, you know, copy shop and printing stuff and sending it in the mail, and you know, wrote me a very lovely little blurb comparing the work to Kafka. But what was interesting was then coming, you know, trying to see if we could get published in the US, you know, as a you know, an American edition. I went to the publisher that had published a couple of his books, and they you know, saw the blurb, and they're like, Jonathan Baumbach thinks this is good, let's give it a shot. I mean, you know, they read it and liked it, but so that was kind of the foot in the door on that one, which is interesting. And yeah, and then the you know, the American you know, edition continued to get some intelligent criticism. And I had a colleague from grad school who taught it a bunch of times, and you know, students would sometimes send me messages and seem to really dig it. I didn't understand why often, because, and this actually I've heard this in the context of the other book too. People are it don't seem like they would have any particular affinity for the subject, the characters, the style.
Oh wow!
They're really
So when does
with it.
the next book come along in this saga then? When does book 2 come along?
So 2005 came the US edition, this one.
Mhm.
And then I, did events and publicized it a bit, I guess, 2005 into 2006. Worked on another one that I didn't go anywhere with from like 2000. I guess like the end of 2005, I started, trying to pick up something that had started and worked on that for a while. And again, spent a very long time on it. It was not good or not going to go anywhere in the state it was in. And I was very stubborn about that and just kept, writing and rewriting and,
So how long did it take you? How long did the first book take you in total to write?
Well, the first one I had a draft together, it was again like writing in real time. It was like something crazy, like 6 weeks, more or less in the form, of the story that is there. I didn't change much, with the plot or anything like that. And then a couple of years, I guess 2 years later, sending it around. So, editing, going back and forth. And then early 2004 was the UK edition. So that was, I guess, almost 3 years, like 2.5 years, 2 3/4 years from like very first sentence in a notebook to a copy.
What about book 2? How long did that one take you?
Well, then I worked on something, maybe like 4 years on the thing that I never published. And
oh wow.
Yeah, and then started, I guess, as I was trying to see if I could get it out into the world. Would an agent want to take this on? Would another indie press want to publish it? I guess I had started. I'm trying to remember this. I guess I'd start like somewhere near the end of that cycle, I guess you could say. I started working on the book that came out most recently, and so that was a 4-year process, and then there was a year, once it's sold before that actually comes out. So 4 or 5
Very
years.
cool. And hold that one up so all of our viewers can see it before we jump to break.
Oh, where is that? Was Vintage Attraction, which also went through a bunch of different titles during that 4 or 5 years working on it. And
very cool. Well,
paperback looks the same.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. Okay, let's do this. Let's jump to break. We'll be right back with Drinking with Authors.
Great.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
Okay, we're back. Let's talk about Vintage Attraction. So, different than your other story, what is this one about?
So Vintage Attraction is, I have referred to it sometimes as one kind of disillusioned academic's journey falling glass first into the world of wine and love when he meets a sommelier from TV that introduces him to a much more interesting world than the one he thinks he lives in prior to that. And has academia in it. It has wine. They end up going off to Greece. So it has some travel.
So is it like a romance?
I think it could be. It has those elements. I mean, it sort of presents a very kind of like fantastic, you know, love at first sip kind of a relationship, you know, between two characters. So in that way, I could say, and you know, like an improbable pairing of.
Is there romance in it? Are they wooing each other?
Yeah, I mean the narrator.
Is it a steady decline into alcoholism? Like I'm just trying to figure out which one it is.
Wait, isn't that dating?
Yeah, that's true.
I'm married, so I don't know. That dating nowadays, I would never.
Yeah, no,
There'd be a lot more drinking.
It would have to be. I mean, because more day drinking, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely has that kind of, you know, he's looking for love in all the wrong places at the beginning, and then, you know, turns on his cable access TV channel one day and finds this show, and it's hosted by.
Hold on, so he's not even dealing with a real person. It's a TV personality.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's part of
So
the
they
thing.
don't actually meet. This dude turns on the TV.
Well,
and
that's
starts
that's where he discovers her, and he has to meet her after discovering her.
Okay, so then he turns into a stalker. Okay.
We're turning this stalker. And this like 2000. I guess they start in 2007. So.
Yes, before
maybe
some
not.
of the interweb stalking could be possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you learn? So you said a sommelier. Did you learn a lot about wine, or did you already know a lot about wine? How did you go down that route of that character?
I had similarly, though I wasn't kind of you know, at least I don't think, a failed writer and somebody that just kind of like toiled in low paying adjunct teaching in a commuter college like this character. I did find, you know, somebody was hosting a show about restaurants on public TV, and you know, decided again pre you know, Me Too, that I should meet this person, and send her an email just like the one that Hapworth sends to Izzy, and she Alpina and then Izzy in the book found it charming. Maybe should have known better, and then you know, she took up with me, and this somebody in the book takes up with the narrator.
It's just so if you wanted to go dark,
your life is what's happening, right? That's what. So these are real life stories.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they come from, like, I mean, I've always said you take I've always said it's all, and I guess this is kind of a good segue into the book. We forgot to mention this anthology that I edited, which is other people's stuff, called The Art of Friction. I was always interested in, you know, the fact that the events, you know, were taken from life, whatever that means, did not, I think, you know, like clear them of the work of having to be put on the page, and that's what the fictionalizing is to me. And so, you know, things might start out resembling something, and then what was interesting is through the many drafts, you know, some things actually, some things that I had completely invented, like I wanted the two to I think I just wanted them to meet randomly. I think I didn't want to do the email thing, and have it be very kind of like stagey and old black and white movie where it was just, at the bar and she turned and they smiled at each other. It wasn't, people weren't taking to it. So I had to go back, I guess, to life and say, it just maybe seemed too improbable that two people like that would get together. And so then, maybe the email had something to do with it. At least it sort of acknowledges that it's the craziness of it all. And even after that, fast forwarding to once the book's out in the world, people still, some of the reviewers, readers said, like, why would this happen? I was like, I don't know. It did. I mean, that's not an excuse, but, I think, I don't know. There are questions that I wouldn't ask of a book, because you kind of like take the elements and it builds the reality out of, what's there.
I'm just saying, if you want to steer into the whole You style skid, you have the perfect story.
Thank you.
To like really go into the like, what I'm talking about, the show You, where he goes and like that's exactly what it sounded like. That's why I was like, wait a second, he didn't even meet this chick, and then it's like you could totally go dark with it. That would be so much fun. Do like an alternate universe.
Probably would have been.
Universe.
It might have been a better read if I had done that. What's that actor's name? I forgot.
Padge Baker.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's cuter than I am, so I don't know if that.
Everybody always does the flourish in movies.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I have a question for you. You 4 years to write the book. Why do you feel it took you 4 years to write the book?
Like all those revisions. I mean, I also went, kept trying different structural things. I mean, that's part of the problem. I think, the modern technology is a blessing and a curse, because you'd read about, writers using a typewriter and they'd get to the end of a draft and then they would start retyping and, edit that way and do the entire thing over again, basically. And some maybe even didn't even, transcribe, but really just went through the whole thing again. That would be great. But, trying to, reverse engineer stuff and change, again, like structural bits, or not really bits, but like, main structural things, takes some time. Like it was originally in the third person, which I really liked, but, people were having a hard time with it. And like,
who are all these people reading your work and telling you they're having a hard time? That's what I want to know.
What kind of asshole
are like,
messaging dissecting somebody's book?
Yeah, how is this getting dissected in moments? What the hell? Like, how does that happen?
Just walk up on you in the street.
Sometimes, yeah. I think part of the why, to answer like why does it take so long? You do need people. You do need readers. You need, people who also write, people who don't, people who read closely, people who don't, so, I mean, getting all those people to work with, hundreds of pages does take a long time because they have real lives and don't, want to do it.
We need to hook you up with different beta readers because this is just too long and arduous of a process. I'm just going to say, having done over 250 of these shows now, way too long, different beta readers. We need to get you a different tribe because this is so long. Are you working on anything now?
Yeah, but one other thing that comes to mind when you talk about that, we're all starting to read the fiction set, in the pandemic era, and obviously, if you started in March of 2020, like that's an incredibly fast turnaround that would not leave much room for any drafts because the these are at least, the mainstream stuff still having to wait that, go through that cycle of the year. So, I mean, for something to come out like, what are we in? Like May would mean May 2021 would be like sort of like the sell it, be pretty much in a final draft stage.
It depends on who you're selling it to. It depends on how you write. We have writers that write 10 books a year. So like, or writers that take, 3 months, 6 months to put out a full length novel. I think every person is different. It's just interesting because this is the first time I've heard so much feedback before the book came to finality. And I get it. And, beta readers are amazing and awesome and wonderful. At the same time, you have to make sure you have the right ones so that they're not rewriting your voice and your work on things. At least that's my opinion. Chelsea, thoughts on this?
I definitely think it comes down to, because it's your book. So like, yeah, you want their opinion as far as, does this make sense? Is this something you would be interested in? But as far as like a constructive criticism type thing, unless it has something to do with the plot, or it's like, hey, you said they were on the street and now all of a sudden they're in the middle of the country, you shouldn't let them rewrite it for you. Like, don't let them critique you to the point that you feel like you have to do all of those revisions, because at that point, just tell them to go write their own book.
Well, I mean, that is true. And, when you teach, when you if anybody's taken or taught writing workshops, you could pass around a chapter to 10 different people and get, every other person's going to contradict, whatever the note is. So yeah, you do kind of want to work with people that, know what they're talking about. I mean, there is something to be said. Again, I do like to get in feedback from just regular readers, who don't have PhDs in English, because, that's important too. And yeah, I mean, it's not that they're rewriting it. I mean, you take in all the feedback, and then, you still have to go through like, the 7 stages of grief over it. And, but, when you are hearing something,
there's 5 stages.
There's 5.
I have a whole series called the Grief series.
Yeah,
that's my series.
Yeah.
Well,
but,
then
about,
go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, then, I feel like you have to, you have to say, like, 3 out of 5 people said the same thing, and I think something different. Like, you have to consider that, if you are writing for an audience. Story. Well,
I mean, it is like, if I came to like, so it's one of those where, so you're writing a story, like, let's say you're writing a story about a puppy, and people are just like, what, I don't like puppies. I want a book about a cat. Well, cats can't do the same things dogs can. Or I want a rabbit. Like, it's no longer your story at that point. And then, like, wouldn't you lose momentum if your story has changed so much that you basically lost your voice? Like, wouldn't you just kind of get bored with it?
I mean, I think it still has the voice. I mean, it's really more of really like, plot and story, kinds of things. But I mean, again, maybe they're not always like, cut this, don't have this, but it's like, if somebody's telling you, I got bored of this, 10 pages in, like, if you're writing for yourself, family members and friends, it's one thing. But I mean, if you're writing to, sell, manuscripts to publishers, and then expect them to want to, do that again with you, and not just consider you a big financial liability, you have to think about that stuff. You can't incorporate every single thing, but I mean, it's all useful feedback. I think this goes on in other media too. It's not just with writing. I mean, like, people make movies and screen them for different audiences, and do different cuts and things like that. It's that stuff can happen faster because I can sit and watch your recut of a movie in 2 hours, but for me to read a whole book, it's going to take longer than that. And then there's just, kind of, seeing the same thing with like minor changes, the mind kind of just stops being able to see that stuff. So yeah, you need other readers, or you need to just make a decision and hope for the best.
Makes sense. What are you working on now?
What am I working on now? I started, I wanted to do some stuff. Well, it's interesting talking about all this, like, real-time fodder. I wanted to go into the past and find something that was taking place in contemporary time, but not exactly in the present. And but I want to incorporate something like a much younger character coming from like the 90s into it, and so that's bringing those two stories together now. So I'm working on, I haven't really gotten to the old part yet, but it will.
Please tell me we're not calling the 90s old.
I was about to say, like, come on, bro. Like
we're not allowed to do that. No, it's not saying the 90s are old. Not yet.
I mean, I still love them, but
you can't say the word old. You can say in the recent past.
Vintage. Well,
that's not vintage. Hold on. Jesus.
Okay, my friend. So are you presently working on something or no?
Yeah. So
what are you working on?
This novel with the two timelines.
The vintage 90s one?
The vintage 90s one. That's what you should call it, the vintage 90s. People will get a kick out of that title.
Don't do that.
It would at least get a lot of attention, don't you think, my friend, to say the vintage 90s? Okay.
Oh, I feel so old. I feel so old.
I do. I feel very aged at this moment in time. John Hughes, roll over in your grave. Okay.
Those movies are 40 years old. That's, a while ago.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I was born in the 90s,
show,
so
Charles.
to say that, yeah. Like, we're hitting some sound points.
He just aged the Breakfast Club. Okay. Charles, how do people find your books and follow you on the social medias if they want to? How do they do that?
Do people still go to websites? I have a website. I have charlesblackstone.com.
I know that's a very 90s thing to do, but people still do that.
Yeah, well, 2000 something, but and Instagram, Charles Blackstone, Twitter, C Blackstone. I don't do Facebook really anymore, mostly because I got locked out once and they took away my custom URL. So it says charles.blackstone.71 or something, and I was not born in 71. And I don't understand why that had to happen and who got the better URL, but I don't publicize. I mean, if you go to my website, you can find your way there. I don't really post anything anymore on social media. Like, I like Insta stories for some reason, but kind of doing the whole like, here I am at this restaurant and look at what I'm eating. I take some of those pictures, but I don't like.
That is very very 2000s. Take pictures of your food, Charles. So as somebody who doesn't want to date themselves, you've literally dated yourself by taking pictures of your food. No, can you hold up your book covers again for everybody? So shameless self-promotion. The books are Vintage Attraction,
and The Art of Friction,
The Art of
the
Friction.
anthology.
Okay.
And then the one where it all began, the week you weren't here.
The week you weren't here. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for being on this podcast with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. This was great. Lovely to share one and some great conversation about these words of ours.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Well, this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance. My co-host host today is the phenomenal C.R. Rice, and our guest has been Charles Blackstone. Our sponsor is Skunk Brothers Spirits. DWA10 is the coupon code if you want to go there. And they have amazing, amazing stuff. I'm telling you, anything citrus related with this lightning is now one of my faves. So we will see you guys next time.